want you to first take your Bibles and turn to the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter number 1. Genesis 1. And Genesis 1 gives us a detailed account of the first day of creation, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day. And then we get to the sixth day. Look at verse number 26. Genesis 1:26. It says, God said, let us make man in our image. And so the plural there, the pronoun us and our is used. And it's God, it's the Trinity of God working. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And so we've been created. We are the crown jewel of God's creation. We have the ability to think and to love and to obey and to do good or bad. It's our choice. And then look at verse number 31, the last verse of the chapter. It says, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. That last phrase, it was very good, is different. As God on all the days, God would say he looked at what he had made and it was good. But on the day that he created man, God looked things over at the end of the day and he says, it was very good. There's an extra word in there, very good, instead of just good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And so what we've just kind of reminded ourselves of is the fact that we've been created by God and his image after him. And he loves us. We were the special creation amongst all the other creation, the creatures, the animals, the birds, the fish. And all that was created for us too. For us to enjoy and to have power and dominion over. And so you and I want you to understand, as we start to look tonight, that God really does love us, and he always has. From the day he created us, we were special in his eyes. And we know in Genesis 3, where the devil, the serpent, talked to Eve and deceived Eve, and she took the fruit and ate and gave some to Adam, and he ate, and they both realized their nakedness, their sin. And they hid themselves from God, and God came. It was unlike any other day. Any other day, God could come in the cool of the day and talk with them, and they greeted him. But that day, they hid. And their sin came between God and them, and it was just an ugly time. And yet, even in that ugliness of that sin, their sin being found out, and a curse being placed on the ground, and the curse that was put on the snake, that he would eat the dust of the ground. I don't know what the snake looked like before all that. I don't know if he'd walked on his tail all over and just a big, tall, regal. Can you imagine a great big, one of those 30-foot pythons, if he was walking on his tail and could walk like that, he looked pretty regal, magnificent. And now suddenly he's flat on the ground. He has to crawl. Or could have been maybe he had arms and legs. I don't know. And God took all that from him and said, now you're going to swerve around like a little worm, the worm you are. And even during that time, God rescued, he clothed Adam and Eve. And he even drove them out of the garden. And even that action was an action of love, because he didn't want them to eat of the tree of life and live in that sinful state forever. So he removed them. But God loved us right from the start. And now I want you to go to Genesis, on into the book of Genesis. Go to the 19th chapter of Genesis. And we're going to start, I think it's important to see this and see just how wicked things are. And this is where the two angels come to Sodom. And so verse 1 says, there came two angels. The angels had already been, they had visited with Abraham. And Abraham had had a conversation with them about finding righteous people that were living right before God down in Sodom and Gomorrah. And that God, the sin of the place had come to God, and God was going to destroy it. And Abraham was trying to see if he could rescue the people. But we're not going to study that story, but instead we're going to the next part of the story where the angels come to Sodom at even. And so it's starting to get dusk. Verse 1 says, there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And so Lot, when you sit in the gate, you are of an importance to the city. It's like you're one of the city councilors, city commissioners. We're getting ready to have an election for those kind of things. And so Lot was there in the gates of the city, and it seems, as you reread the story, he may have been there by himself. The different people, the different men who sat in the gates of the city may have taken turns kind of running things and being in charge. And so it says there that the two angels came to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, he saw these two men coming. He rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And so that's why I believe that Lot probably was by himself, because he is telling these two, they're angels, but he's unaware that they're angels. He just thinks they're strangers. And Lot is well aware of how wicked Sodom is. And he asked these two strangers to come to his house. I'll feed you. You can freshen up and spend the night and get up early and be on your way. He, in a sense, doesn't want everybody else that's there in Sodom to even know that what's going on with his two visitors. But they said, nay, no, but we'll abide in the street all night. And so these were angels, but they were well aware this was all part of what God wanted to be done. And so at first they said, we won't bother you. We'll just stay out in the street. And Lot, as a city councilman, he knows Sodom is a wicked place. No way. And in verse 3, he pressed upon them greatly. And they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So he fed them. He talked to them. But someone saw him go with him. And this place is so wicked. But verse 4 says, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed or encircled the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. Now, I've had people tell me that when it says all the people from every quarter, that doesn't mean everybody. I'm telling you, if it says all the people from every quarter, that means everybody. That's how wicked the place was. Everybody was involved. And what do they want? They called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. And that we may know them, that's a biblical way of putting we want to have sex with them. Sodom is so wicked that everybody in that town got around Lot's house and wanted that to happen. And Lot's living down there. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him. So you can see Lot closing the door behind him. He's trying to be such a diplomat. And he's not very good at it. And he said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Don't do this. Behold now, listen to how Lot has fallen into a depraved state and way of thinking. He says, behold now, I have two daughters which have not known man. I have two virgin daughters. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Take my two girls. What kind? That goes beyond even comprehending. But he says, but unto these men do nothing. He was willing to sacrifice his 2 daughters for those 2 strangers. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. They came here, and for Lot to be thinking, they came here and I feel obligated to protect them. In my mind is screaming, what about his 2 daughters? They're under his roof, he should be protecting them. And he's willing to give them up. But the people are so depraved, verse 9, they said, stand back, get out of the way, Lot. And they said again, this one fella. Now they're running Lot's reputation down further. He come in here, who's he think? This one fella came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. He's going to tell us what to do. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. And so they moved forward. They're going to grab Lot and abuse him. But the men put forth their hand, the 2 angels, and they pulled Lot into the house to them and shut to the door. So they rescued Lot, got him inside, and they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. They were blind, and these people in Sodom were so wicked, even being struck with blindness, they were still trying to find the door. That's what it says. And the men said unto Lot, these are the angels, hast thou here any besides, son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters? And whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. And so we're going to skip part of the story now. I wanted you to see just how wicked it was. Lot tried to talk to him. He had some sons-in-law. He talked to them, and they mocked him. They were part of the town. And if there were sons-in-laws, that means he had some other daughters that were married now to men of Sodom. Lot's family is really messed up. Lot's messed up. We know that with what he's offered. And so he drags his feet. The angels have to gather him and his daughters and his wife and move them outside the city. And Lot doesn't want to, they tell him to go for the hills, but he wants to run to another city, Zoar. And so they don't destroy that city because Lot's going there with the fire and brimstone. And so his wife looked back. Remember Lot's wife, she looked back longing, like, oh, I'm going to lose everything. And she turned into a pillar of salt. And so look at verse number 26. It says, his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and behold, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. It came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities into which Lot dwelt. God did it for Abraham. He saved Lot for Abraham. Look what happens. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, our father is old, and there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. And so what that firstborn daughter says to her younger sister is, hey, there's not another man like our dad. We don't have any hopes of finding a man that would even hold a candlestick to how great our dad is. Verse 32, she says, come, let us make our father drink wine, get him drunk, and we will lie with him. We'll have sex with our dad, is what these girls now are talking about doing. That we may preserve seed of our father. We can have a baby by our dad. And so now we've already seen in this chapter just how twisted Lot was in his thinking. We know how twisted everybody in the city is because all the people compassed them about. And now Lot brings these two daughters. His wife is turned into a pillar of salt. It doesn't really mention anything about them grieving or it's like she just turned into a pillar of salt and they're gone. And now in a cave, Lot's two daughters are scheming about sleeping with their own dad to have a baby by their dad, and they think that's okay. And so, verse 33 says, they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived he was so drunk, it says, he perceived not when she lay down nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow, the next day, that the firstborn said unto the younger, behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink. We'll get him drunk again this night also. And go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down nor when she arose. And so, as I read that story, it makes me believe that Lot drank quite often. Because there's nothing in that story where they have to say, we've got to somehow convince him. I don't believe it was a rare thing that Lot got drunk. I think it happened a lot. The Bible doesn't really say that, but I believe those girls knew that and used that against their own dad. But here's, as wicked as it all is, and man, I can't think of a more wicked story in the Bible than what we've just looked at. But here's the kicker. Verse 36 says, thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And I've shared this part of Genesis 19 with you because I wanted to get to that verse. And now we're looking at this man, this child that was called Moab. And he grew up and became the father of a nation, the group of people, the Moabites. That's where they came from. They came from an incestual relationship between a daughter and her own father. That's where these people came from Moab. How'd you like to be part of a group that you knew where you came from was that? Wouldn't it?
In that day, though, did that go on a lot because all men didn't have one wife. They had many wives. And not only had many wives, but they had concubines. And so if the angels couldn't get him out of town, where did the wine come from? You reckon they just took the wine?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, because
they must have had to. I hadn't thought of that. They had to take wine with them. So when they were leaving town, they had to think, well, we want to take our alcohol with us.
Well, now, water in some parts of the country ain't no good.
Yeah.
So they drink wine.
Right.
And, I mean, they cities over across the water that water costs more than gasoline. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so it's common that they drink wine, not to get drunk, but when they have a meal, like we drink pop or water or whatever with our milk, they drink wine. Now, I'm not saying what they did was right.
Yeah.
But they had to take the wine with them to get Dad drunk.
Right.
Either that or it didn't take much wine to get him drunk.
Yeah.
Now, maybe he didn't drink much, so they give him just a little bit, and he was drunk. If you're not used to drinking,
right,
and you drink a little bit, you're wasted.
Right.
But if you drink a lot, it takes a
lot
to get you drunk.
Right.
So maybe he didn't drink.
Well, I believe I think he did, but just because it didn't take much convincing to get him there. But as far as having more than one wife or having concubines, yeah, that's one thing. But to sleep with your own dad, that's a total different ballgame.
I understand that.
And so, but I want you to see that this person, this baby, is Moab. And now I want you to go back to the book of Ruth. Because in the first chapter, remember, Naomi and her husband and her 2 sons left the land of Israel and went to Moab, the land where the Moabites were. They went to that group of people. And to go there, they were leaving their place, and it's a picture of sin. Going to it, and if you were to pick a sin, if you were going to, I'm going to go to the sin of thievery. I'm going to go to the sin of lying. Or I'm going to go to the sin of incest with a daughter and a dad. If I have to pick, that's a pretty rough one. And that's where they end up, and we know that Naomi's husband dies. We know that her 2 sons get married, and they die. And she's left with her 2 daughters-in-law, and one stays in Moab, and Ruth decides she's going with her. After 10 years, she's going back with Naomi. And, remember, here's what she said. I wrote this down. It is an awesome statement that Ruth makes to her mother-in-law. You talk about the level of commitment. I want this to sink in with you, that what Ruth said to her mother-in-law. She said, "Where you go is where I'm going to go. Where you lodge is where I'm going to lodge. Your people are going to be my people. Your God is going to be my God. And where you die, I will die. And where you're buried, I'll be buried." That level of commitment, if someone came to you and told you basically that kind of a thought, who would do that? Do you have someone in your life that feels that way about you? That's huge. I wrote it down and I thought about it. I want us to realize it. If there's ever a statement made in the Bible that screams, "I am totally committed," it's Ruth. And in our story, Ruth is a picture of the bride. And so as we look at it, Boaz is a picture of Jesus Christ and his rescue of us. And so as Jesus Christ is the rescuer of us, then we need to be committed. What if we said to the Lord, "Lord, wherever you want me to go, I'll go. I'll stay there as long as you want me to stay. And I'll die wherever you want me to go. I'll die there. I'll be buried there."
That's what he wants.
That's exactly what he wants. He wants that level of commitment. And so remember, Naomi and Ruth, they come back. And I think when we left the story off at the end of the first chapter, people in the community, she came back where she lived. And the people were looking and saying, "That's Naomi." And very quickly, the news spread and people knew. People found out what had happened. Her husband died. Her 2 boys died. That girl that's with her, and Ruth was a very beautiful woman. And that girl that's with Naomi is one of her daughters-in-law. And she has committed herself. And people probably began to talk about Ruth's talk with Naomi. That girl loves her mother-in-law. She's committed to her. And, part of this, in our society, there are so many things different in our world from this that we're looking at in Ruth. Okay? It's so different. In our society, if you lose everything, what happens to you if you lose everything? Well, maybe you can start over, but before you can start over, if you lose everything, what happens to you?
Well, you declare bankruptcy.
No. See, you haven't lost everything. I mean, I'm talking if you lose everything. What happens? Where do you go?
If you die,
You become homeless. And where do the homeless live? On the streets. We have them everywhere. And the land of Israel had a system to try to keep that from happening. Every 50 years, there was a year of Jubilee. If you had to sell your property, they would farm themselves out to be a slave or to be a servant. And it would only last so long. But at the year of Jubilee, there could be a rich dude, and he did really well and was really smart and was very shrewd with his dealings and everything like that. And for 49 years, he accumulated all kinds of land and everything like that. But on the 50th year, that land went back to the original namesake. And it was called the year of Jubilee because, I mean, can you imagine? You're homeless and you make it 49th year. And finally you think, tomorrow is it's the year of Jubilee. And you get something back. No wonder it's called the year of Jubilee. Woo, hot diggity dog, I'm going to have a piece of property again. And I think Larry said, start over. He could start over then. And so when Ruth came back with Naomi, Naomi's husband and Naomi, they had a piece of property. Ruth had a piece of property. The only reason Ruth had a piece of property, it was because of her dead husband. But if you don't have anything, you know what has to happen to your piece of property you got? You have to sell it. They were all but flat broke. And Naomi sends Ruth. There were safeguards to help people. I mean, instructions. When you got the crops out of your field, you weren't to get every bit of the corn in the corners. You were to turn and leave that corner. When you got over here, you were to leave that corner. And it was easy, to drive a tractor. How hard is it, Gene? Is it hard to get into the corner? It takes a little more work getting the corner. Yeah, sure it does. So God's word said, leave the corner. And so you left the corner in the corners. And who was it for? People that were flat broke, that didn't have anything. You were to help them. And so, thinking about all that, let's go to chapter 2 of Ruth. Okay, it says, Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said to her, go, my daughter. And so Ruth said, let me go to Boaz's field, and I'll go in the corners, and I'll get us some grain. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers. Notice what that verse say? Where did Boaz come from? Bethlehem. Isn't that something? Even within the story, he's inserting just little subtle things within the story. Where was he born? And so he comes from Bethlehem. And so this Boaz, he came from Bethlehem. And he sent it to the reapers. And so I want you to see something about Boaz, the boss. He's the employer. He's very, very wealthy. And he's out in the field with his employees. And he says to them in verse 4, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. And so inside our story here, it mentions the boss's relationship with his servants. And remember, Boaz is a picture of Jesus being our kinsman redeemer. What kind of relationship does Jesus have with his servants, the angels in heaven? I mean, we don't have to find a verse. I mean, what kind of relationships he got? We know. Oh, loving. How do the angels feel about Jesus? How do the angels feel? Did they hate him? Despise him? No, man, they love him. He's in our world, we would say he's the man. They love him. And so he's going around and he's encouraging his workers. The Lord be with you. And they answered, and I believe it's not one at a time. They answered him, the Lord bless thee. The relationship between the Lord, the boss man, the employer, and his workers, it's great. And then said Boaz unto a servant that was set over the reapers, whose damsel was this? So he noticed, Boaz noticed Ruth. Does God notice us? You know, one of the best verses, for me, this one sticks in my mind all the time. He remembers our frame that we are but dust. I'm a little speck of dust, and yet he loves me. Wow. God loves me. I ain't nothing but dirt. And so in this story, Ruth she's nothing. But Boaz has noticed her. And the servant that was set over the reapers answered. See, the word got out. It's the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. And so now that worker tells the boss man, and she's a worker. We need to be workers. We need to be workers for the Lord. And then said Boaz unto Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. So Boaz approaches Ruth and says, I'd like for you not to go anywhere else. You just stay right here. He's speaking of safety. You stay right here with my workers. I know you'll be well taken care of and provided for. God's going to protect us, and we're going to be well provided for. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And so he's really stepped up and protecting her. He says, when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. So Boaz is inviting Ruth into his company. You can drink our water. And then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? And so she falls on her face in front of him. And now remember, I said earlier that our society is so different from back in this society in this time. I think we all understand the men ruled. They were in control. And so at this point, after Boaz demonstrates such compassion towards Ruth, she falls on her face before him and can't believe that this man would treat her like that. You ladies might be thinking in your mind, well, I'd never fall in front of a man. No, it's a different time, okay? It's a different time, and we got to understand, what was going on. Notice what it says, Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother, to thine husband. He's talking. I heard what you said. I've heard I know how you've treated your mother-in-law. He's really impressed with that. Since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, where you were born, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. You didn't know anybody here. You've just left all that and came here. The Lord. Notice Boaz. He's a man that includes God, the Lord, in his business. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. And so Boaz says, you have chosen the right place. You have put yourself under the wings of the God of Israel. You've chosen the best God, the one true God. And then she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, that thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like unto one of thine handmaidens. I know I'm different. I'm not like everybody else that's here. I appreciate so much your kindness and your kind words. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither, and eat of the bread. Hey, when it gets mealtime, you come on over and just eat with us. And you don't have to, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. And so now it's gotten to where she's eating there with them. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not, and let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. So he now tells his workers, on purpose, accidentally on purpose, guys, you drop a little bit extra corn out there where she's working, so it'll be even easier. What's happening to Boaz? Can you see that he's beginning to kind of fall for Ruth? He is. It's a love story. And I realize it's a human love story. But it is also a picture of God loving us. And if somehow in your life you discover something that's kind of in your path, you say, well, look at here. Look what I got in my life here. You know what I call them. Remember what I call them? Sugar plums from heaven? Yeah. It's Jesus like Boaz. I'm going to drop this over here so that you'll have a really good time with that. And so we need to recognize when a blessing comes, it's God saying, I love you. And, there's a verse in Scripture that says that no man cared for my soul. That'd be a really tough spot to be in, emotionally, in your heart, to think that, I don't think anybody cares about me. No man cares for my soul. It doesn't matter if I live or die. But the truth is, God does. God cares. And so if you're feeling all alone and beat down, God loves you. Now, we've run out of time. And we're right kind of in the middle, but we're going to stop there. And if you're thinking, oh, man, I wanted to go, well, I'm glad you're feeling that way. I'm glad that you're interested, that God's words kind of piqued your interest. You say, man, this is better. This, in reality, this is better than General Hospital, or As the World Turns, or As the Stomach Churns, or whatever those soap operas are. They're just made up stuff. This is a real, true love story. And it gets better. Gets better. Okay? And mother-in-law, Naomi, she gets involved.
Don't you think that Naomi, being the Christian that she was, okay, and she had, you say, I know that all things are possible with God, but she had such an influence on the way that she did with losing her husband, her two sons, and she wasn't maybe bitter or whatever.
Right.
And that's why Ruth said, look, I'm going to go with you, no matter what.
Right.
And all this.
Absolutely. I think you're right.
And what she had taught her, just as if she was her child, she had taught her things. And that's why that went on. But I've also, another thing, back to the father and the daughters.
Oh,
When Noah got off the ark.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. It's almost that.
Yeah. You know what that tells me? No one's perfect.
Right. But God told Noah and his sons and his wives, his daughter-in-law, or whatever, he said, you all got to make things happen. Mm-hmm. So in order to do that, I'm going to let that go there. did wasn't right.
Right.
But they thought, they heard all the booming, and they thought, this is the end of the world. There ain't nobody but Dad and us. And you, a while ago, you said they didn't even grieve over Mom.
It doesn't say they did.
Probably Mom was last in the line of walking up the hill. Dad, your two daughters, and Mom. And maybe they didn't know she turned to a pillar of salt.
Well, eventually, you know.
I mean, eventually they did.
Right.
She wasn't there.
Right.
But, you know, the reason she did turn back, she had kids and
Yes, she did.
grandkids
She did.
back in the city that just got destroyed.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
And
But but at the same time, they were told
exactly.
not to look back.
Well, we're told don't drive fast.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
We're given a lot of instructions. I know. Does everybody have one? Wow, exact number. I've enjoyed all this. I'm going to shut this off.